Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the best Rangers podcast in town. I am Andrew Chelney alongside Nick Zararis. We scream about the Rangers so that you don't have to. This is episode 49, live on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube, and we're available wherever you get your podcasts as well. Today's show is about the Rangers' radio silence regarding their coaching search. We'll also get into the playoff games from the league as well, and a lot more. Nick, first and foremost, before we talk about anything else, rest in peace, Derek Boogaard died on May 13th, 2011 at the age of 28. It's been 12 years now. And we talked about this kind of pre-show. The Rangers didn't say anything about it. The Wild didn't say anything about it. The NHL didn't say anything about it. The PA didn't say anything about it. Everybody that has ties to the NHL did not post anything, didn't say anything about the anniversary of his death. It was very strange.
Yeah, no, I wanted to touch on this. I'm glad you brought it up too. One of the single most important books arguably the single most impactful book I've ever read was Boy on Ice. The New York Times journalist pieced together a story recounting Derek's life, from how he got his start, how him as a 16-year-old beating the shit out of an entire team is what got him to a higher division of junior hockey. If that never happened, he probably never makes it to the NHL, because for as big as he wasn't a particularly good skater. He only was getting to the league one way, and that was by being a face puncher. And 28 years old, reading that letter his mom publishes in the Regina publication, that really just, it tugs at you. And It's why we get into these arguments about what's a dangerous hit versus what's a clean hit, what's a dirty hit, because at the end of the day, brain damage is brain damage. It doesn't matter if it happens as a result of a clean play or a dirty play. These guys are fundamentally changed for the rest of their lives to play a game for our entertainment. It really is as simple as that. And radio silence on all fronts, it's not a great look. Like, I understand there's a very real CTE lawsuit being played out in real time. Gary Bettman has repeatedly denied a link between repeated concussions and CTE, even though the NFL, which makes infinitely more money than the NHL, has already kind of thrown their hands up and said, yeah, we admit it, but we're not going to do that much about it. Whereas the NHL, well, Gary went before Parliament last year and said, no, there's no connection between the two. Our doctors don't believe that, which is contrary to all we understand. We don't know everything about CTE. We still can't diagnose it in people who are still alive, which is one of the real conundrums of this, and getting people help who need it. We can only diagnose it after people have already passed. And it's why you've seen certain entities really make an effort to reach out to players, the NFL, the NHL. Hey, we think you might be suffering from this. If you are okay with it, if your family is okay with it, we would like to study your remains after you pass. And if you're okay with that, it might make it so that someone else doesn't have to struggle with it. And that's really where we are in the head injury discussion now. It's not so much an acceptance of reality. It's we understand this to some degree. What can we do going forward to either mitigate it best we can, to limit it best we can? And we've come a long way in a very short period of time in terms of some of the language, the culture around this. And I still think the NHL, with like the mandatory spotters and guys getting pulled from games for head bumps, doesn't happen nearly enough in comparison to what should actually happen. The NFL is better about this. Granted, they let guys go back in way too quickly, but at the very least, the NFL is better about getting guys off the field and getting them in front of the independent neurologist. But to just have radio silence across the board, not even from the PA or the Alumni Association, where I understand why the Rangers or the Wild might not touch this, because they feel, a certain degree of culpability. And it's like the saying, I wish I could have done more. Well, that's an admission of guilt, so they won't do that. But the PA, the Alumni Association, neither of them, even just a simple rest in peace. It sucks, man. It really just sucks.
Just it's as simple as quote tweeting the post and saying "forever in our hearts," a forever Ranger, a forever Wild, like anything that would show like, hey, this was somebody, this was a human being that was a part of our organization that died at the age of 28 years old, and 12 years later, we're on the anniversary of his death, we're still thinking about him. Like it doesn't have to, like, if you don't want to make this grandiose statement, if you're an NHL team, just say like, rest in peace, 12 years later, forever a Ranger, forever a Wild, forever an NHL player. Like just anything surface level. It doesn't, I understand the lawsuit and all these things, but by just acknowledging that he's not alive anymore has nothing to do with admission of guilt or what have
Yeah.
you. Maybe this is just speculation, but maybe there's some kind of unspoken agreement as to just kind of leave that alone. I have no idea. It would be a shame if it was, because again, like this is not just like an NHL 23 be a pro. Like, this is a human being. Like,
As a person.
this is somebody that was somebody's son, somebody's brother, whatever. Like, this was a real human being that died at 28 years old. Acknowledging that they are no longer alive should be the
The bare
floor.
minimum.
Should
The
be
bare
the
minimum.
absolute bare minimum. Like, hey, this person, fought people for us. This was somebody that was in our organization, in our system, in our league. He used to play our sport, and he is no longer here. And we mourn his passing 12 years on. That's all you had to say. It's not, if you don't want to touch CTE and why he died, et cetera, from the NHL's perspective, I understand why you wouldn't want to do that. But as a human to human, this dude is not alive anymore. At least, if you're a pro team, a pro league, you gotta come out and you gotta say something, because it just looks really bad. It's a really bad look for the teams and the NHL.
This is the quintessential hockey guy's guy. This is everything the hockey guys value. I will do anything for my teammates. I will protect my teammates at all costs. And it cost him his life. As outrageous as that sounds, protecting his teammates in hockey from the age of 12 to 28 when he passed is the reason he passed away so prematurely. It would not have happened if he was not playing professional hockey. I know reading Boy on Ice, one of the chapters in there is talking with his dad, and his dad saying, I wish he would have just been a policeman like he wanted to. If he had just been a policeman, he wouldn't have died at 28 years old. He wouldn't have been a hockey player, and maybe he didn't get to chase his dream, but he'd still be here with us, and that matters. And it's weird timing. I won't say coincidence or anything, but another study related to CTE was published last week. I want to say it was Columbia Medical Journal, about the early death rates amongst enforcers and NHL players in general. So blah blah blah, fighting already has nearly disappeared from the NHL. Yeah, Columbia University. So 6,039 NHL players from 1967 to last year, so 2022. So enforcers are defined as players who've participated in 50 more fights, and they're compared to players who had less than 50 career fights. Over 90% of the players are still alive, but there's a real difference between the two. So the control group, which is all players with less than 50 career fights, the average death rate, 57.5 years old, which is still very young.
It's still not great. Like, regardless of how you spin it, dying at, like, the average age of an NHL player dying at 58 is very low. Very low.
No, the average mortality in the United States for a man is 77 years old, if I remember correctly, and a woman, it's 80 years old. So that's significant. And then enforcers, 47.5 years old. So even 10 years younger than the average NHL player from that group of 6,000 plus players surveyed. So there's real correlation causation here, where there's a real tie. And yes, some of these deaths aren't rooted in what you would say like natural causes, where some of those guys in their late 50s, dying younger, not natural causes when you die at 57 years old, but there are suicides, accidents, things like that, which skew the age younger. And that's not to make it, as equivocating. Like, this is all bad. This is not a good look on any front. And it's just so frustrating that we know better, and there are still so many people with a vested interest in maintaining what we already have, as opposed to trying to make it better. That's why we harp on the violence and the unnecessary hits and looking for the right situation and trying to make the game better, because that's ultimately what this is about.
It's just so disheartening to see that these stats are crazy. Like, to think about the average age of a former player, passing away, 58 is egregiously low. I mean, this sport is so physical, so, like, every hit that you take, I would have to imagine at least, slightly I don't want to say like slightly damages your brain, but I feel like, with every hit, especially if it's a big one, like, something's moving up there. Something is moving.
One thing I want to say this, so I want to be clear.
Mm-hmm.
So of the total pool, 90% are still alive. Of that 10%, that's
Yeah.
where we're getting that 57 and a half, 58-year-old number from.
Right.
Just want to clarify.
Right.
So just to be sure, so make sure people got it. Go ahead, Andrew. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Every hit, something's moving up there. It
Yep.
might it
Yep.
might not be bad enough to cause a concussion, but something's moving. Like
Yeah.
like people have to understand that your brain isn't like direct like is essentially in a pool of water. Like it can't like it's not stuck to one particular place. Like the thing is moving. And if you hit your head hard enough, that's what causes concussions because your
Yep.
brain is slamming against your skull. That's what a concussion is, and that damages the a lot. Like that is
Yeah.
extremely damaging. Like people like a lot. I feel like some people hear the word concussion or hear the word CTE and they don't quite understand what that means. Your brain is going 300 miles an hour and slams into a wall. And that thing that slams into a wall is the thing that makes you do normal activities. It controls every part of you. This little sponge thing that is just floating around in your brain in your head is what controls everything about you. So if you take that thing and you throw it against the wall, what's going to happen?
It
It's not going
changes.
to end well.
Your brain changes, and that's one of the common things you'll read in any of these obituaries for athletes who die young from head injuries is their personalities changed, they started acting more erratically, they depended on drugs just to get through the day. And it's very simple to understand how this happens because your entire life you are coached through, you play through everything. If not, the doc will get you ready to play through anything, and then you get into those drug seeking behaviors. And this is the last thing we'll talk about before we move on to more hockey centric things. Is it's one of the last parts of Boy on Ice is Derek running out of prescriptions, where he was still getting prescriptions from the team doctor on the Minnesota Wild while he was on the Rangers. He was getting prescriptions from the team doctor on the Rangers. He ran out of painkillers from 2 doctors and still had to get more to get through the day because of the constant discomfort he was in, whether it be joints and muscles, because multiple shoulder surgeries, broken hand, especially as an enforcer, the repeated bashing your hand into someone's face. You are in constant pain when you are an enforcer, and lingering concussions and post-concussion syndromes where you've got that dizziness, that nausea, that unsettledness. So it's not just oh, this is unfortunate. It is the game directly led to this, and everybody just sitting in silence doesn't sit right with either of us. It just doesn't.
I also think, and I don't know if it's still a rule. It might still be a rule. And if you hear ambulances outside my window, it's because I live right next to a hospital. And so thank you, ambulances, for making your cameo. But like the thing, I think there's still a rule in the NHL where if you are in a fight, it's a
You
2-minute
can't take your helmet
penalty.
off.
You take your helmet off, which is the most ridiculous rule on the planet because like when you're fighting, what are you going to do? Punch somebody in the shoulder where there's a lot of padding? No, you try to punch the face. Why then do you make people when they're in a fight punch helmets? Like what like
So they don't get punched in the skull. That was the
like
concession.
man, it's
There's no
like
the obvious answer is you get rid of fighting altogether. That's the obvious
which
answer.
I mean, listen, if you say that, you're gonna get pitchforks in your mentions. Like
Yeah.
it's there's no winning here. Like
There isn't.
there is no good solution that makes
No, there
everybody
isn't.
happy. Because if you take fighting out of the game, then you get the Don Cherries of the world that will cry about it until they die. But if you keep fighting in hockey, then people will continue to die from CTE. So there is no clear solution. There is just no winning. But the fact of the matter is that every
The
time
players are losing. The
the
players are losing.
players are the players are the ultimate losers here because they're the ones dying for your entertainment. Because they go punchy at each other and they're dying and you get to clap like that. That's why you don't want to ban fighting, is because you enjoy you enjoy clapping at the end of it. You enjoy the punches thrown. Like I understand the need to have it in the sport itself. It's deeply ingrained in the sport. It's been something that has been in hockey since day one. And I understand the history and all these things, but at the end of the day, At a certain point, what is more valuable to you? Everybody's brain function continuing to operate as normal, or they continue to go punchies at each other and people die for your entertainment? Which is you, like, you have to decide. I'm not talking to you, Dick. I'm just talking, like, in the ether.
No.
You have to decide which is more important to you. Are you okay internally? Because you have to look within yourself. Are you okay with people dying early because you get to watch them punch each other for 2 minutes every now and again? Are you okay with that? Because if you are okay with that, that's a whole nother conversation that we're not going to get into. But at the end of the day, those are your two options. Make your pick.
Yeah, no matter what, the reckoning will come for the league. The premature deaths is really what kind of sped it up in the NFL, where the NFL kind of was backed into a corner with kind of having to admit some fault and pay out some settlements. There are a lot of issues with how those settlements are being allocated and who's getting priority with what monies from the settlement. But at the very least, the NFL eventually conceded the point and took care of some, not all of the people who needed it. But moving along now, we'll touch base on the lack of news, because that's frankly the news with the Rangers is we haven't even heard who they want to talk to yet. There's just idle speculation. There's the in-house. You could do Knoblauch. There's Jay Leach, who's the Seattle assistant. Peter Laviolette, who got fired from Washington. There's Mike Babcock, who hasn't coached in a few years. Those are really the only four that I've heard with any real regularity linked to the Rangers. And then Friedman and Merrick have both been on the Rangers probably won't hire somebody without NHL experience based on how the David Quinn thing went. So that kind of eliminates Knoblauch and probably eliminates Leach. And really quickly, you're left with the uninspiring group of candidates we talked about last week as being wholly uninspiring, which is what sucks about this, because at the very least, if it was somebody without a track record, you could kind of gaslight yourself into being like, hey, all they need is an opportunity. Maybe this is the opportunity this guy needs and he can break through. If you bring in somebody like a Laviolette, who, has coached continuously in the NHL for 21 straight years, won a cup in 2005, 2006, and has made 2 subsequent cup final appearances, you don't got a lot to show for it. You really don't there's not an easy way to sell that to the informed fan. The casual fan, yeah, whatever. To the informed fan, none of these guys is particularly enticing. The baggage they bring with them, especially guys like Babcock, basically non-starter for me, but
Yeah.
there's no great place to start this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, the way that Chris Drury talked about Knoblauch when he first hired him to coach Hartford kind of at least made me think that maybe this is the next coach, especially because of the way that Hartford has been rolling
That
throughout
was
the
2
course.
coaches ago, which is the crazy thing, because they hired him in 2019
Yeah.
alongside David Quinn.
Right, but my
No, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
what I'm saying to you now is that, okay, well, he talked about Knoblauch and all these great things and all that, but now Knoblauch has a few years of experience in the pro scene. He's seen some guys play in the AHL. He's coached them up, and now they're in the big leagues. And through that, he doesn't have NHL experience. But again, like, at the end of the day, you can. How can someone get NHL experience if you don't give them the NHL experience? Like, you can't. Like, it's essentially the help wanted. Like, hey, we need 16-year-olds with 20 years of experience. It's like, how do you want me to approach the situation? There's like, you have somebody's got to compromise. Either a 16-year-old has to, like, have more experience that they're alive for, or you make your expectations reasonable and lower your ridiculous standards and hire the appropriate person for that job. So by all accounts, the people that I've talked to, because again, I don't watch the AHL, I don't watch minor leagues, I don't watch the European leagues. I work in basketball. I watch a lot of NHL. I ain't got time. Like, that's just not my expertise. So I've reached out to people that do watch the AHL and do have an understanding of these people. And by all accounts, Kris Knoblauch is a very knowledgeable coach that pushes a lot of the right buttons that takes teams to the next level. So maybe he is the right pick because he's already in house. the Rangers know who he is. He's like for Jay Leach, for example. Like I'm sure he's great. I don't know anything about him. And the
I know he
Rangers,
coached in Providence, which is kind of the appeal for me because the Bruins have a good AHL
sure,
operation.
like yeah,
That's
like
really the only appeal for me about him. Because Grant, the funny part of this conversation is we're both here clamoring for Dave Haxtell assistance from his time in Philadelphia, which went fucking awful. Which is what's funny because Kris Knoblauch was a Haxtell assistant, and Haxtell got fired. Haxtell sat out a year. He's the Seattle expansion coach. He brought Leach along, and Knoblauch. That's what's funny about this to me is because the Dave Haxtell tenure in Philadelphia was an unmitigated disaster. They sucked. They were an
yeah. I
atrocity.
mean, the thing about assistant coaches, especially in failed teams, is how much
Yeah,
of
no,
them
I
in
agree with you.
particular, led to that collapsing. Like the Flyers, by all accounts, when that group was together, were terrible. There's no arguing that. But how much did Jay Leach contribute to their demise? How much did Kris Knoblauch contribute to their demise? We don't have the answers for that, and we never will, because like the biggest person that people always have to talk about is the head coach, but the assistant coaches, they specialize in certain aspects of the game. They are there to coach the defense, for example, or coach the special teams, for example, or coach certain aspects of individual play to hopefully get the best out of the players that they have in front of them. So off the top of my head, I don't know what Kris Knoblauch did in Philadelphia. I don't know what his expertise was, but clearly, whatever he did from that point to now as the head coach of an AHL team, he's clearly learned a lot. Because if he wasn't if he wasn't a really solid AHL head coach, then people wouldn't be gleaming, like people wouldn't be talking about him with such smiles on their faces.
I
If
also
he
think we're also a little bit nervous and we're trying to talk ourselves
Right.
into
Well,
someone.
yeah. I mean, part of this is absolutely like, please, anybody but Babcock, please, I beg of you, I'm begging, crying, anybody but Babcock or Quenneville for sure. But like, by all accounts, people that watch the league have great things to say about him. So if nothing else, if let's say right after we finish this episode, the Rangers announced that Kris Knoblauch is the next coach of the Rangers, there are definitely worse options out there, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't be upset.
No, I definitely would be fine with. I'd be fine with Knoblauch. I'd be fine with Leach. I don't want Laviolette. I don't want
No, no,
Babcock.
no.
I don't
All
want
the
any of.
retreads are like, what are they going to do? What are the
There's not.
retreads? What are
What
they
are they going to
going to
do
do
from Gallant? What are
specifically?
they going to do different from
Right,
Gallant? That's
right,
the
right, right.
reason why I can't argue for one of the retreads. Is you just got rid of a coach who, and we're going to talk about this in a second, who the GM very clearly didn't put a lot of attention into, because by all accounts, Gallant was like the third or fourth choice. And Drury was like, okay, whatever, hired him. 2 years went by and goes, this isn't working. Yelled at him after game 4 and then fired him 3, 5, 6 days later. And that's a recurring theme I'm starting to gather here with Kris Drury is when things aren't working, he likes to yell a lot. Everybody knows about the 2 separate times he did it to Kravtsov when he wasn't even the GM of the team. He was the assistant GM of the team. And then doing it to Gallant, somebody who, he's supposed to be in a collaborative role with, where you're supposed to get along with your head coach. Like, my brother in Christ, you hired the head coach. What do you mean you don't get along with him? That was one of the things that really kind of irked me in reading some of these profiles and some of these kind of obituaries of the Gallant tenure, is that, well, he and Kris Drury never really saw eye to eye. Well, the GM hired him. If he wasn't going to be able to see eye to eye with him, he shouldn't have hired him in the first place. It would, again, speaking back to what we talked about 2 weeks ago, they didn't want to put in the work. They went with the easiest answer. They brought in somebody who they thought would be able to jump in, raise the floor, not really worried about the ceiling, just raise the floor, get to that level where once you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. And 2 years later, we're sitting here reading, oh, well, Kris Drury wanted to hire Ron Brindamore or Mike Sullivan in the summer of 2021. Why would the Penguins or the Hurricanes would have let their highly successful coach go to a division rival? And you can't trade for coaches anymore. This isn't like back in the day where the Rangers could have made an offer, if this was 1983, to send a first-round pick and a third-round pick to the Penguins for Mike Sullivan. Hell, right now, if the Rangers could do that, I would argue that would be a good idea to see if the Penguins could trade for Mike Sullivan. But that's not a reality of today's NHL. And talking about Mike Sullivan while he's still an employee of the Penguins doesn't make sense. accounts, the Penguins, by all accounts, have to keep doubling, tripling, quadruple, quintupling, sextupling down on the group they have because they're not rebuilding. They've got Sid
No.
Malkin and Letang for 3 more years. They're going to keep running it back. Getting rid of one of the 5 good coaches in the league does not make sense, especially now we can put to bed the Kyle Dubas to Pittsburgh rumor based on what Kyle said in his press conference today, that he's either going to coach the GM the Leafs next year or he's not going to be in the NHL. He's going to take a year off. So that puts to bed the whole, well, Dubas is going to go to Pittsburgh and he's going to bring Keep with him and Mike Sullivan's going to get fired. And it's not happening.
No.
It's not.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing about that too is like that pretty much also, by the way, not essentially confirms, but like I would have to imagine that Eric Tulsky is going to be the next GM of the Penguins. But like regardless of that, yeah, I mean my like dream situation is that Mike Sullivan gets fired from Pittsburgh and the Rangers swoop in to Mike Sullivan's doorstep and they're like, here's a blank check. Write any number you want. I don't care how big it is. You can just draw the infinity sign for all we care. Here's a blank check. Coach this team. That's the dream situation. And then I wake up from my slumber. Like that's the kind of thing that just won't like that. It won't happen in reality unless the Penguins are very silly, which they are. They have been silly in the past. I kind of don't know if they're that silly. I mean, the
sidebar about the Penguin silliness. I have a question for you. Do you think Ron Hextall is a plant? Because one of my Penguins fan friends has been texting me about this and it's not Hunter. One of my other Penguin fan friends has been texting me. I'm still convinced Ron Hextall was a plant to make sure the Penguins didn't win another cup while the Flyers were ever doing whatever.
Why would they hire him then? I don't know. Why would you hire a plant then if that's the case? But like for Mike Sullivan, yeah, I would love for the Penguins to be really ridiculous and fire one of the best coaches in the league. And for the Rangers to be like, hey, here's key to the city. Here's James Dolan, I guess. Like Jimmy's gonna fly in on his private plane and then present the check to him if that's what Mike Sullivan wants.
Bro, Mike Sullivan's gonna be playing harmonica in the straight shot in the fall.
That's right. James is gonna offer him a place in the band. He's gonna they're gonna go on a tour. You know, like this. And then I wake up because this thing is ridiculous. It's not gonna happen. So while he is the dream situation, is it likely? No. So you got to base your expectations based off of what is actually going on around you. So is Brendan Moore going to get fired? No. Is Sullivan going to get fired? No. Is John Cooper going to get fired? No. Okay. Is Jared Bednar going to get fired? No. Okay. What are your options then? You're going to go for the retreads that got fired by their 9th team because they did a bad job? Or at a certain point, you gotta go new. And, you know, I guess I'm convincing myself into Kris Knoblauch because based off of the people that are currently available, I don't really know who is currently better than Kris Knoblauch. I tweeted out, you know, when Gallant first got fired that Andrew Brunette would be a good spot. Based off of what I've been told, Lindy Ruff could very well move into front office and Andrew Brunette is the next head coach of the Devils. I have no idea if that's a possibility. Maybe the Rangers talk to him and maybe they can figure that out. Because Andrew Brunette, as we all remember, kind of got shafted by Florida. They removed Joel Quenneville. He became the head coach. They did very well.
They won the President's Trophy.
And then the Panthers were like, nah, bro. We got Paul Maurice. And you get the assistant's job. And then he's like, get the blank, you know, I'm not going to say that. Get the redacted out of here. I'm out of, you know, I'm leaving. So now he's the assistant coach for the Devils. And I would have to imagine that Lindy Ruff at a certain point is going to say, I'm tired of this. You do it. So now, maybe he is, but you know, Brunette could be a good option, but Kris Knoblauch is somebody that I guess I've convinced myself that he's currently, as of right now, because I don't know what's going on in New Jersey, so let's just put a pin in that for a second. As of right now, as of May 15th, 2023 at 6:29 p.m. Eastern Time, I feel like there's really no better option that is currently available to the Rangers than Kris Knoblauch.
So, 2 things on that. Number 1, today at breakup day, Lindy Ruff said he wants to stay as coach of the Devils. Whether the Devils actually want him to or not, that's another story.
Right.
And then the other part of that is this is where us not being in the hockey men club shows, because all of the hockey men are entirely convinced Peter Laviolette is the solution because he's a hockey man. He's got the experience. He's led both young teams and old teams. He's been in the league so long, he can deal with every type of player. And that is true. He 20 plus years in the league, has coached continuously for 21 straight years, hasn't taken a year off at any point in his tenure. Because I went back and was looking at coaches and their impact on the first year. And most of the time, a new coach going to a decent team is going to get that first year win percentage bump. They usually do better with a new voice, whatever. It's not really a testament to that particular coach's ability, just the need for change more so. But the reason I think we're willing to try this is if it blows up on a Knoblauch, a Leach, a Brunette, we at least feel like, hey, they tried.
They tried. Yeah.
They did something outside the normal. The process was good. We can't guarantee the results, but at the very least, the process makes sense. That's why bringing in a Babcock, a Laviolette, etc., you're telling me that just because you think your process isn't any different than what happened last time in Toronto with Babcock, or what happened in Washington or Nashville or Philadelphia or Carolina or the Islanders, everywhere that Laviolette's been. What's the meme from Parks and Rec? Did it work out for any of those people? No. Then why is it going to be different this time? Because we're the Rangers, which has been the Rangers thing for the last 15 years, is we're going to bring in Dan Boyle. Well, he's been deteriorating for the last 4 years. Well, we're the Rangers, and he's going to be fine playing with Mark Stahl. Or we're going to bring in Kevin Shattenkirk because we're the Rangers, and he wants to play for us. And we're going to bring in Jacob Trouba because we're the Rangers, and he wants to play for us. And that's my concern here, is just bringing in Peter Laviolette and saying, we're the Rangers, he'll figure it out, is how we got here in the first place, because Drury said, well, I can't get one of my two guys. We'll get Gallant. It'll be fine. We're the Rangers. Come on.
Sure. Well, a quick addendum on David Quinn. The idea of bringing in a David Quinn was a really good idea. Yeah. Just because it didn't work out with David Quinn, because people quickly realized that this man cannot coach in the NHL.
He was out of his depth. He wasn't ready for it.
He wasn't ready for it, and he got hired in San Jose because they were college roommates or alums to get. I don't know. I don't know why he got hired in San Jose, but that aside,
he played college hockey with the GM.
Sure, yeah. I guess if that's why you hire a head coach. So
hey, bro, I'm hearing Patrick Waugh and Bob Hartley because they played or coached Kris Drury.
Perfect. But the thought process of, hey, the Rangers are completely rebuilding. This is one of the biggest up and coming college coaches in hockey. Let's go out and get him. That is great. I really liked the idea in the ether of let's just try it, because getting a retread doesn't do anything for us. So let's try it. And it didn't work because he can't coach, but I don't know why the Rangers are afraid of trying it again, just because their first attempt quickly discovered that he can't do it at the NHL level. There's a ton of other up and coming coaches around the world. I watch the NHL. I watch the NBA. I don't know who's the biggest up and comer in college or in Europe. I don't have the answer for you. I guess they could, or Nick Nurse, or Mike. You know what? The solution to everything is the Rangers hire Mike Budenholzer and the Milwaukee Bucks hire Gerard Gallant. That is the biggest solution that we could ever figure out on Liberty Blue. But the idea that the Rangers shouldn't try a new name because it didn't work the first time is ridiculous. If there's a really good up and coming coach that is going to be an NHL head coach, regardless of whether you give him the opportunity or if somebody else gives him the opportunity, you should try, because at least, like you said, at least if it doesn't work, you could say, hey, at least we tried. At least we didn't go for the boring answer on the test. We went for something exciting. We went for a new perspective, a new outlook. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. But hey, at least we tried.
So, two things. Number one, my favorite tweet of all time is still Mike Budenholzer looks like he's playing a casino game he doesn't fully understand the rules to, and he's
Yeah,
bet more
yeah,
money
yeah.
than he can afford to lose. And number two, our obvious solution is just to have Thibs coach the Rangers and play Adam Fox 56 minutes a night.
Perfect. Yeah.
Because if anybody could play 56 minutes a night, it's Adam Fox. But yeah,
Sure.
most of these candidates are not enticing. We haven't even heard leaks of like, oh, the Rangers talked to this person or that person. So we're kind of all in the dark here, which leads me to the one of the subheadings that's underneath us. If you're watching the video, reading the news, there's a reason it's all of the coaches who are currently unemployed that are being speculated about
PR.
is correct.
PR.
And it's important that for the non-news literate, for the people who don't have journalism or communication backgrounds, nothing is getting reported out of the goodness of someone's heart. When people have scoops, it is because someone is trying to advance an agenda. When an insider gets a text and then it's tweeted within 5 minutes and it's using specific verbiage, it is there for a specific reason. It is either trying to help a certain cause or hurt a certain cause. The reason you keep hearing Mike Babcock to the Rangers is because Mike Babcock would like to get back into the NHL, even though he's officially retired from professional hockey. And if they can talk their way into getting an interview, anything can happen if Mike Babcock gets an interview.
His agent has been messaging Friedman and Drager and Saravalli and all these guys, hey, please do PR.
You saw this. Mike Babcock was on NBCSN to try and get his credibility back, to kind of soft launch him, to get the idea of him back in the ether.
Yep.
That's what you're seeing. And
even a more recent example, Rick Tocchet was on TNT for half a season. Everybody was like, "Oh, he's a hockey man." And then the Canucks went season and a half, and then the Canucks hired him. Like that, it's the exact same idea for Babcock. It's he's on our TV screens, so he must be a good coach. I cannot believe that this individual is out here doing media as opposed to coaching. Someone should hire him, and the Canucks were silly enough to do it. So. We don't even have to go as far back as NBCSN. We've seen it with Rick Tocchet.
Yeah, and that's what makes this time of year so frustrating for us is we just want actionable information. I don't need to know who they hired. It'd be nice to know that, they weren't just sitting around with their thumbs up their asses waiting for Sullivan to get fired or so, because that's kind of what it feels like right now is maybe they thought they'd be able to hire Quenneville, and that's why they fired Gerard Gallant as abruptly as they did, and they didn't go to think like, oh, wait, we should ask the NHL before we do this. Kind of like how everybody just assumed they were going to get Jack Eichel, and then it didn't happen, and then he traded Buchnevich for a bag of chips because he was setting up traded Buchnevich.
Don't get me started, Nick. No. You don't get me started.
Andrew, I'm going to take my hat off and put my tinfoil hat on right now. And this is why the Rangers traded Buchnevich so abruptly, was they assumed they were getting Jack Eichel and needed to clear up cap space to set that up. They also didn't know they were actually going to get him. They preemptively started constructing the roster under the assumption they would get Eichel. Remember, they started that season with about $10, $11 million in cap space. They were making all of the moves to go and get it. We heard Eichel to the Rangers for a year and a half. That would be what would get the Rangers over the hump, that they would go from rebuilding to contender by blowing up some of their rebuilding assets to go and get him. The problem was twofold. Number one, they didn't actually know they would be able to get him. And then two, they didn't have a backup plan when they weren't able to get him, which is kind of what we're still dealing with, which is why we have Vinny Trocheck for the next 5 years, because they couldn't get the center they wanted to pair with Zibanejad. So they threw a dart at the wall and said, he's kind of a good center. And that's how you have Vinny Trocheck, Hedl, and Zibanejad down the middle, as opposed to Zibanejad and Eichel, or what I was advocating was just Eichel. But that's neither here nor there. My main point here, and why I keep coming back to this, because it's true about the coaching hire of Gallant. It's true about the roster construction. We talked about it last week, how they didn't maximize their cap space in the fall. They didn't do the paper transactions. They rostered Ryan Reeves for 3 months instead of trading him in the offseason.
How much of that, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but how much of that is because Chris Drury is a new GM in the NHL?
I don't think it's that. I think it's more, I think it's not I think it's not having foresight. I think it speaks to what I was talking about before. He operated under the assumption, oh, I'm going to call the Hurricanes or the Penguins and be like, can I hire Mike Sullivan or Rod Brind'Amour?
But to add to that, isn't that lack of foresight because he's a first-time GM in the NHL?
I think there's a hubris to it. I think he thinks, and granted, you have to be a really arrogant person to be a successful professional athlete the way Chris Drury is. You don't get to the point he is in your life as a professional athlete without having that confidence, that air about you that I can do anything I set my mind to because I can do it. Everything in my life, Little League World Series, Stanley Cup, Conn Smythe, Rookie of the Year, all these things, all not Conn Smythe, Rookie of the Year, Calder Trophy winner, all those things are testament to his confidence in who he is as a person. Being a GM, no different. Instead of trying to beat Joe Sakic on the ice, I'm going to beat him on the phone. Instead of trying to beat Doug Armstrong on the ice, I'm going to try and beat him on the phone. I know Chris Drury and Doug Armstrong didn't play hockey at the same time. It's a metaphor. You get what I mean here. The Rangers have operated, and Drury especially, have operated under this assumption that we're the Rangers. I'm Chris Drury. I'm going to get what I want. And he's done an okay job of it at points. He's had 2 good deadlines. I'll give him that. I didn't like some of the decisions in terms of the roster construction, but I can understand why he built the roster the way he did. And again, we haven't even started dissecting the roster. We have a whole summer to start working on that.
3 months to get to 4 months to get to that. So we have plenty of time.
Yeah, to talk about the roster. But again, just to tie a bow on this before we move on and we'll wrap up talking about the playoffs at large. It's been 9 days, 10 days since they fired Gallant, and we haven't even heard whispers yet. And part of what's made Drury's operation confusing is that they don't leak anymore. The Rangers used to just text Larry whenever they had news they wanted out there. Drury doesn't. For whatever reason, it's been a lot harder to get good information over the last 2-3 years about transactions, the coach, whatever. And that leads to where we are now, where all we have is silence, which fuels speculation, which is the Rangers' default media public relations strategy is just let them talk themselves into a tizzy. Whatever happens, whatever, and we'll figure it out after that. So until we get more concrete, like they've talked to person X, Y, and Z, all we can do is read what's out there. And again, what's out there is out there for a specific reason. It's not out there to make us a more informed public. It's out there because Agent X texted reporter Y.
Isn't it interesting, Nick, that every single year when there's a head coach that gets fired, all of a sudden you hear, well, this person that is not coaching right now could be a great fit for this team. Oh yeah, like that. It's such a coincidence. It's such a coinky dink that it happens every year from the biggest PR heads of the NHL, and that is of course the insiders, because that has all like. When was the last time? I mean, like even Woj and Shams do this on occasion. If they, because even the biggest insiders, it's a scratch my back, I'll scratch your back kind of situation where, hey, like I'm gonna, I want this information from you, but every now and again, like I need you to do a favor for me, do this PR spin, and I'll continue to give you information. Like Woj has done that from time to time. Like, hey, the blankety blanks have reached out to, or potential fits could be X, Y, and Z. Like that has been a thing that Woj has done. But overall, Woj is way more than just, hey, this person texted me, so now I'm going to tweet about it. Like
Speaking of NBA things, Isola saying the Suns should hire Isaiah Thomas.
He's a coworker of mine, so like I
forgot about that.
He's a coworker of mine, so like
Isola's everywhere. I forgot he works there.
Yeah, so it was via our show earlier this morning. If I don't work on the show, I'm not. Listen, I listen to enough of our content. If I'm not actively working on the show, I am not actively listening to our station. Maybe I should. I don't know. Clearly, I'm missing a lot of good content. But yeah, I think he said something along the lines of like Isaiah Thomas could potentially be on their radar, or I don't know, something along those lines. But wild. Yeah, maybe he is on their radar. I have no idea. Clearly, Frank knows something that I don't. Right, like he wouldn't be saying this out of the thin blue air. And I don't know. Maybe Zeke reached out to Frank and I was like, "Hey, message me on the air." I kind of doubt it because like Isaiah Thomas doesn't need Frank Isola to do that. So I don't know. That's I'm not gonna touch that with a 10-foot pole right now. But like the Drager and a lot of the guys in hockey media absolutely will just not say anything unless like they get the PR spin from their agent, or like, hey, Mike Babcock available, and then Drager and Elliot and all those guys are just like, but what about Babcock? He's available. It's like, oh well, what a shocker. I wonder why you're suddenly talking about him.
So Andrew, so when Kris Knoblauch doesn't get this job, do you think he's going to sit down and say, "I met the criteria, but I wasn't selected"?
I think if the Rangers don't hire Kris Knoblauch, he's going to be the head coach of some team in the NHL very soon.
Probably not this upcoming cycle because there's just not a lot of job openings at the moment. But I do agree with you. I think he'll get a look sooner rather than later. Okay, real quick, we'll wrap up on this because we're already kind of running relatively long for the offseason.
You give us mics, and we that's what we do.
The Ranger, I can't make heads or tails of these playoffs, which has kind of
Yeah.
been like these are even weirder than the usual NHL playoffs where you get like one weird team in the final four. This year you've got arguably like 2.5, 3, where like Vegas is playing Aiden Hill, who has like less than 100 career starts. Florida's playing Bob, who was a 901 goalie this year in the regular season. He was 909 last year. He's 902 the year before that. You've got the Stars, who have Jake Ottinger, who's been one of the worst goalies in the playoffs, which is weird because he arguably has the most talent of all the goalies left. And then you've got the Hurricanes, who have Ronta, Freddie Anderson, and Kochetkov, which not exactly a murderer's row of goalies here in the Final Four. And we'll see.
Philip Grubauer in Seattle as well.
And Martin Jones, Grubauer and
Marty Jones, baby. Marty Jones.
Marty Jones went to more Stanley Cup finals than Henrik Lundqvist. That's how I know God isn't real. Okay?
Why would you say that to me right now, Nick?
Because
I really like that. That just burned a hole in my heart. I hope you know that, like that you have caused heartburn. I just need you to know that right now.
Because I was doing research earlier today. I was looking at the cap hits, the percent of the cap hit of goalies to make at least the conference finals over the last couple of years. And Martin Jones being in the conference final multiple times was kind of crazy to me. But I forget, he was actually decent on the Sharks when the Sharks were kind of in their twilight down the road. They made 2 conference finals, so that's pretty good. The goaltending has been very weird. The power plays are up and scoring is up in general, but you saw the limitations of the power play heavy stuff with Edmonton.
Yep.
Vegas, in their 5-on-5 situations, the Eichel, Barbashev, Marchessault line had Nugent Hopkins and down the lineup in Edmonton in friggin' hell. All 4 games.
Wait, are you telling me that when teams focus on 5-on-5 play that they win games? Is that what you're saying?
Well, Andrew, 5-on-5 play is somewhere between 70 and 80% of the game, depending on the individual game. And emphasizing that, and it's funny you say that because the TNT panel, it was ESPN. I think it was Messier asked McDavid a question about scoring goals on the power play, and McDavid goes, "I don't know why you guys talk about it. Power play, even strength, they count the same." Well, Connor, some of them are harder to get than other ones, which makes them more valuable. The even strength offense, while good, and I understand why Woodcroft was running Draisaitl and McDavid together when they were chasing the game. But that kills you if you're Edmonton because your other 3 lines can't do anything without those guys. Those 2 with Evander Kane and then Bouchard on the back end, that's great for, the 20 minutes you're going to have them on the ice. The other 40, you're in deep shit between Nurse struggling back there, Cody Ceci struggling.
$9.5 million, by the way, for 7 more years.
The North Division merchant himself, Darnell Nurse, having the career year in the fake 56-game season where the Canadian division resembled the Dutch league in soccer. The Dutch league is where bad players go in soccer to go and get their goal scoring up because nobody plays defense. Like Josie Altidore, one of the most overrated soccer players of all time, had a 40-goal season in the Dutch league because nobody plays defense over there. And then he went to Sunderland and couldn't play in the Sunderland 11, how bad he was. So that's kind of my comp for that. That's a really niche joke for soccer heads who remember 2014. I know Andrew doesn't know. Has no idea what I'm talking about.
Over my head.
Yeah. The North Division was an environment conducive to a lot of offense, and Darnell Nurse mooched a lot of secondary assists off of Connor McDavid having like 100 points in a 56-game season. I've been rambling. Seattle, Dallas tonight. It'd be very funny if Seattle gets to the Final Four. I hope Dallas gets to the Final Four because, frankly, I enjoy watching Dallas play. Seattle's got a good style, but Dallas has more guys I enjoy watching. In the East, I don't know. I think Carolina is better, but who knows?
Chaos. I mean, I'm a Stars fan because of friend of the program, Scott Wedgwood. I hope I'm going to convince him that if the Stars win the cup, that he will bring the cup to my house so I can, take a picture with it and drink beverages out of it. That would be great. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it's in the same realm of Mike Sullivan being fired from the Penguins. It's like, if it's a dream, I don't know.
It's
but
not
like,
impossible.
But like, it would be great if that happened. But I don't know if it will. But you know what?
Unless, but what if?
Haha, unless. I kind of doubt that because Scott is in Dallas. His house is nowhere near the state of New York. But as as somebody that dreams and has dreams of seeing the Stanley Cup IRL one of these days, it would be great if Scott Wedgwood would do me a solid and shipped it all the way to my house so I could drink beer out of it. That'd be great. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm rooting for him, rooting for the Stars, I guess, for the remaining of the playoffs. They're also just a really good team, and Joe Pavelski deserves a cup anyway. So I feel like the Stars are the best built team if Jake Ottinger stops being bad at hockey, because he's been really good at hockey up until this point, especially if you remember last season against the Flames. He was the best player in the league. I mean, he was unbeatable at that point. And so it's kind of interesting to see like what he all of a sudden now he's struggling, which I think if the Stars can win tonight, I kind of think the Stars take it all.
My favorite stat of last year's playoffs is that Jake Ottinger saved more expected goals in 7 games against Calgary than Darcy Kemper did the entire playoffs going on to win the Stanley Cup. That's how good Jake Ottinger was in the playoffs last year, that he saved like 8 goals saved above expected in 7 games. Just ludicrous numbers. We'll be around if news breaks. If there's a coach, we'll do our best to go live as quick as we can, give you some analysis. We're on watch. We're on call. Not on watch. We're on call. Wrong expression. Wrong. We're on call. If news breaks, we'll be there. Hopefully they get this coach situation figured out sooner rather than later. You don't want to be stuck in the game of musical chairs when the music stops and not have a coach, which there is a possibility of that happening. So if you wait around for the ideal one and hope he gets the job, you might end up not with the guy you want. And that's how you got Gerard Gallant in the first place, which is why we're sitting here right now. So we will talk to you guys either when the Rangers hire a new coach or next Monday. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, available on all the major audio podcasting platforms, over on YouTube as well. Broke the 100 subscriber threshold.
Quick.
Thank you.
Real quick.
Oh,
Pierre LeBrun.
Yeah,
Pierre LeBrun, a minute ago, said the Penguins were aiming to interview 10 to 12 GMs on Zoom. One of the names, I mean,
Peter,
our boy Pete Chiarelli has been interviewed by the Penguins to be their next GM. Now, if there is a deity out there in the ether, I will ask for nothing else ever if the Penguins hire Pete Chiarelli. Oh my God, the content, Nick. Give me Pete Chiarelli to Pittsburgh, and I will never ask for anything again.
So what's the 2023 equivalent? Jake Gensel for like trying to think of a mediocre right-handed defenseman. Like Scott Mayfield if he could skate, like that kind of trade. Yeah.
Sure.
So Jake Gensel for Scott Mayfield coming to an NHL.
The deal is 1-for-1.
Yes. Bob McKenzie just woke up from a stupor at the cottage. Bob McKenzie just felt a disturbance in the force and heard 1-for-1. He clutched his chest. He's asleep with the cabana hat on his
margarita down.
Yeah, he's asleep on a chair outside the cottage with the cabana hat on, and he just heard 1-for-1 and clutched his chest, thought he was having a heart attack. Yeah, so make sure you're around. We will be. Want to thank everybody who broke the 100 subscriber threshold on YouTube. Thanks for those of you over there. We'll be around.